Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Blowback Roundtable. I'm Billy Bob, and we have Carlo and Ben with us again today. Carlo is a little under the weather. He is actually still alive. It's hard to tell by looking at him, but he is hanging in there, and he's gonna be joining us, even though he's not feeling well. But so this week there's so many things going on. We have a lot on our notebook to discuss. Um, where would we like to begin, Ben?
So weekend at Carlo's, we had several big meetings, all of them difficult, apparently. That was the official getaway from it. The first one was the Jeddah fast, which was over the weekend, where it was supposed to be, according to Kirby, it wasn't really meant to be peace talks. So although that was the official thing, 40 governments, 40 people unite to create peace talks in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. No, it was meant to popularize the Zelensky. They didn't call it a peace plan. They called it the Zelensky formula, 10 points under which Russia capitulates, just gives up, basically changes government, by the way, that's in there, and gives up the nuclear control of their nuclear weapons. And that was Zelensky's peace plan. So
who was invited? Who was invited, Ben?
All I know is 40 countries. I know Russia wasn't, and I know Hungary wasn't. Obviously, Hungary is not that important just to me, but, without Russia is the main point here. There was governments mulling this over, okay? Mexico and Brazil already said, this makes no sense to us. We're not going to attend without Russia. It makes zero sense. Interestingly, China did attend. Saudi Arabia organized it, but it really looks like, I think Alexander Mercury said this, like it was a Sullivan project meant to be at the time when there was supposed to be a big breakthrough in Ukraine. So they could solidify and, look, here we go. Here's our ultimatum to Russia. And it absolutely turned out to be the opposite. So immediately off the bat, the Saudis, they initiated their own peace plan, which was vastly different from Zelensky's. And it involved, ceasefire on all fronts, maintaining the Ukraine's territorial integrity, negotiations under UN supervision, and the exchange of prisoners. Those are the four basic points leading up to negotiations. But, Russia wasn't invited. They already said, by the way, they called Russia immediately after the meeting was concluded. And then the old new foreign minister of China, Wang Yi, also called Lavrov. There's documents about this. And Russia said, no, sorry, we're not interested because Zelensky already made it illegal for Ukraine to negotiate with us. So there you go. There was no joint declarations, no joint statements, just people, 40 countries looking there silly, looking at a camera, who met for zero reason at all and achieved absolutely nothing except for the Zelensky formula being dead. Even Ukraine is just no longer sticking with it. It's dead. It's gone. That was the Jeddah fast.
Because Ukraine is in no position to dictate terms, right? And right now, they're we're seeing what they're able to live with. And basically they're willing to accept Russia's surrender. And so if Russia wants to oblige, they can, but that's all. That's the extent of the of what Ukraine is willing to.
It's exactly right, but doesn't it sound surreal to say it? They are willing to accept the surrender of Russia.
Well, right, because the facts on the ground don't lend itself to Russia needing to capitulate like that.
Let's look at Carla. Do you want to chime in?
No.
Let's look at what they've achieved. What is it? We're in month 3 of this big counteroffensive. If you mark it on a map, they I think sacrificed 40 how many thousand lives dead. This is according to Shoigu and the Russian ministry, for like 2 or 3 kilometers. They have managed to just recently do drone strikes on a Russian ship on the Black Sea, on 2 bridges in Crimea. This is not the Kerch Bridge. These are 2 other bridges that connect it with the Kherson region. And they blew like 2-meter holes in them. That's it. It's in 2 days, it's going to be up and running. That's nothing. That's what they managed to do on the actual military front, nothing else. So they call it a standstill, but they're out of everything. On the popular front, I just saw Zelensky play fighter pilot with the new Macron is in a shit position. We'll talk about that later with Africa. So he sent the French version of the Storm Shadow missile along a 500-kilometer missile, which is called the Scalp. over to Zelensky, and he had this photo opportunity. He had the Trizub, the trident of Ukraine, and the Eiffel Tower, like on this rocket, and Zelensky signed it with Slava Ukraini, and put in the fighter pilots, in the little cabin, and played fighter pilot for a day. I think this was yesterday. That's the PR wave of it, and the second PR front was basically this. For me, it's horrific. It's the worst case of stolen glory. The big motherland monument in Kiev, built by the Soviets, as 80% of Ukraine was, they defaced it. They got rid of the coat of arms of the Soviet Union. And just a couple of days ago, they managed to raise it. It was just hanging midair for 2 nights in a row because they couldn't get it up. They put the Trizub up there, made of European steel. So people woke up and saw that, like as if they slaughtered the Nazis, they saved the country. These were the opposite guys. These were the guys fighting on the side of the Nazis. But who cares? That's what he has. He has these PR victories. Unfortunately, my feeling is, and later news will probably underline this, is this PR thing is just no longer working. You can see it in the Western press. You can see it in the news surrounding the upcoming BRICS summit 1 week from now. Yeah, you can do PR stuff for a while, but as soon as just the reality is getting too bitter, even for the Western sponsors to swallow. That's my opinion. So in the perspective of Jeddah, that's what they have achieved in a week. It's like zero. They're less than zero. Just people dead.
So ostensibly, they were gonna. They invited 40 countries that were not really, all in on the U.S.'s side, right? And they were trying to entice and encourage these 40 other countries to go all in with the U.S. and side with the West against Russia. And like you said, it didn't end up with any kind of joint declaration or any kind of statement of agreement where everybody signs. So yeah, the question is, like, what did it do? And like you said, it did nothing.
Absolutely nothing. Yeah. And as you said, it was outside of the Western bubble. This wasn't EU countries. This wasn't Australia. It was mostly what you would call the global South. And Andriy Yermak, who was representing Ukraine, he said this wonderful phrase that the talks in Jeddah were difficult at points. For example, when it comes to Russia's responsibility. Now, in diplomatic talk, that means it's a miserable failure.
Yeah, and it means that these 40 countries, many of them, if not all of them, do not view things. They do not toe the Western narrative line, where it's Russia's unprovoked aggression, and because that's not reality. That's and these countries, aren't going to buy into the Western nonsense and the Western narrative. They're going to have some backbone and some sovereignty and maintain a position based on reality, not on Western idealism.
What are they going to do? Sanction Russia? I mean, India just banned the export of non-basmati rice to keep food inflation in check. They need food from Russia. They need fertilizers. What are they going to do? Starve themselves just to please little Zelensky? I mean, the reason I put in Hungary, Carlo is going to say something. I know I'm not trying to put too much importance on my country, but Orban would have found friends there. People who share his opinion. That's why they didn't invite us. That was just my little point.
You recall with your last statement, what you bring to mind is Borrell's recent statement.
Oh, that, yes.
Now, what's interesting about the conferences at Jeddah is it takes months to prepare these conferences. All kinds of people behind the scenes. I hear the buffets are tremendous.
This didn't come about in a week, obviously, yeah.
But if you have a contract with a catering firm, you could be in big trouble for canceling your contract. But anyway, the point is, they only had 2 choices. They could have gone ahead with the conference, which they did, with no teeth to it at all, or they could have canceled it. And if those are the only 2 choices, I think they came to the determination that it would be better to have the conference than to cancel it. Even though I'm fairly certain that there has to be enough rationality in the second and third ranks of policymakers in Western countries specifically that knew that the whole thing was going to be a disaster from the jump. I just have that feeling.
Yeah, that's an interesting. perspective. So they planned it a while ago, hoping to be in a much better situation, maybe on the battlefield and with a lot more leverage, and demonstrating to all these countries, hey, you better get on the winning side, and this is your opportunity.
Exactly. That's what it was meant to be, I think. You
But
better get on the winning side.
because
Look,
of the lack of any movement on the reality front on the battlefield, that it was a disaster. And then what do? Do they cancel it, or do they just go ahead with it and have nothing
but,
be the result? And obviously the latter is what they.
but what is the West the master of? They still have the media. So obviously, one day before the Niger coup, there was the Russia-Africa summit. They called it a failure all over the place. Only 47 out of the 54 appeared. Only, prime ministers of, I don't know, 13 countries? It's a dismal failure. Putin's losing friends. So this, I think, they'll just call a win. It was vastly successful. We don't know what came out of it, but it was very successful. Look at those smiling people. I think that's what it's going to be. It's going to be these stories. Look at this nice summit. These are the people who want peace, but Russia doesn't want it because they just want to kill everyone.
Only fools that don't watch this program are going to believe that, though, Ben.
Yeah, I don't have anybody in my family who believes that any longer, thank God. But I think that's still, we can still paint a rosy picture of this.
What
Can't we?
can somebody read, or I can read the actual quote from Joseph Borrell?
Do Borrell. I don't have a good Italian accent.
Who can do it? Who can read it? I have it here. Okay. I mean, I'll read it. I don't have an accent. So here's what Borrell said to
late last week.
The many countries in Africa that continue to engage in purchasing of Russian goods and not signing up to sanctioning Russia. So
wait, just a second, because also accepting, I think, 21 billion of debt cancellation from Russia and free grain. You see, you're not supposed to accept that. You're supposed to start
free grain, not just buying grain, but accepting
including delivery, just free. There you go.
Borrell says by accepting free Russian grain, you will give up independence. They are trying to revive slavery in a free land to bring you to your knees. You have to choose between hunger and human dignity. And why? No, that's the end of the quote. That's the end of the quote. But why would anybody choose hunger when you can choose human dignity? But they're getting both. They're getting both with Russia. They're turning their back on humiliation. They're embracing dignity and full stomach. So the Russia, the African countries are doing both, and everybody understands that in Africa. Everybody knows that. It's just these clueless, I don't know, gardeners in Europe that have no appreciation for the perspective of actual Africans and the best interests of actual Africans.
I continue to be surprised by his stupidity, but the insensitivity. I mean, at least he's not Belgian. Someone who owned the Congo once. That would be even worse. But he's Italian. Italy had a very vast empire in the African nations, and you're supposed to forget all that. But Russia is the big colonizer now, and we always just wanted what's best for you. We built your little industries, and still, I don't know, 80% of Niger is without power, but that's because of your bad governance, not because of us. No, it's Russia.
On the other hand, in Borrell's defense, he is not talking to the 97, 98% of Africans, right? He's talking to the 1 or 2% that share his class interests.
The comprador class.
And we need to keep that in mind. Like he's not these people never, when they talk about the planet and the people,
freedom,
they're talking freedom for the wealthiest and richest oligarchs. Like that's who matters to them, and that's who they mean when they talk about humanity. They're not talking about 98% of us, 99% of us. So in that sense, does the ruling elite, the wealthy elite in Africa, do they benefit from having good relations with Russia and China, or are they better served going with the West? So again, to hear Borrell say it, the oligarchs are going to be better off joining hands with the West. But believe me, China and Russia know how to benefit both. They can benefit the capitalist interests, and they can also benefit the nationalist interests and the populist interests
It
of
was
Russia.
Yeah, I wanted to get to China in a minute and Africa, but I wanted to comment on Borrell's statement. The sadism behind that statement, the is immense, enormous. Here you have a country that's considered Niger, that's considered the second poorest country in Africa. Uh, uh, their main export is uranium, which is used to produce electricity for France and other countries. Yet, 80 to 90% of the population in Niger does not have electricity.
Mm.
So, what does the West do? They pressure Nigeria to cut the little ration. Listen, it's almost laughable. It's almost a joke. Oh, Nigeria is going to cut their electric
Yes,
power that
they did.
they sent to Niger. I'm going, what electrical power to Niger? 9 out of 10 people don't have it. You moron! I mean, I'm watching the mainstream media, and that's a great thing to do. That's the way you get them. You sanction them. You cut. What are you going to sanction for these people? For Christ's sake!
They are struggling for
And then
much more
Burrell's statement reveals it all.
mundane things, like water, like your daily meal, basically. And those are the people who are supposed to starve for human fucking dignity of Borrell. By the way, can I bring in a little anecdote? This was in one of Vlichek's books, and he was in one of these big cities, I think Djibouti. And he says you go into this center. He calls it the green zone, like in Iraq, which is sort of a gated community with hotels, McDonald's, a lot of people drinking coffees. They all speak English. They're all from NGOs or from the leading, around that, it's poverty absolutely everywhere. That's who Borrell was speaking to. You have this freedom. You live in this island, this emerald island of, relative riches. Do you want to lose all that because of fucking Russia? That's what who he was talking to, is my feeling. This comprador class, always the local comprador, is the local leadership who was elected not to represent the local interests, but to the interests of an external foreign power, usually, sucking the resources out, which is what
I think by and large, the African bourgeoisie is making the right decision. They're seeing the writing on the wall. They're realizing that what the West has to offer them is not close to what can be offered them by China and Russia. And I think they're going to make the right decision. I think it's a done deal. It's just a matter of time.
Look, we followed beat for beat the Niger story, but I want to bring the latest in, which I found in La Figaro, French magazine. And apparently something like 80 something, I didn't jot down the number, of senators sent an open letter to Emmanuel Macron saying that basically the French strategy in Africa has failed because one after the other, after Mali, Senegal, Niger, all of these had coups and are moving away from the Francophone. And they use these words. It's turning into a military Russian Africa and an economic Chinese Africa. And they didn't say they hate us. They misunderstood France. And apparently he had to get it's not called it's the minister of the armed forces for some reason, who had to talk with these senators saying, no, the plan was not a failure. The plan, which they call it Operation Barkhane, was not a failure yet. So he's on the defensive. It was the latest. I think that was an astonishing thing. I can send you the Le Figaro link. So basically a lot of French, I don't know if it's high level, but senators, these aren't the poor average French, said, you've already failed us, Macron. And we obviously, we still had Vicky Newland, Cookie Newland also going there, but I don't want to rush ahead with the story.
Well, I wanted to mention that there was a History Legends episode. So History Legends on YouTube, he does current events, but he's a little bit of a culture warrior, a little bit of a cultural conservative, and he pushes back on the woke stuff. But I don't really follow. I don't agree with them on a lot of these things. But he was definitely criticizing France's strategy in Africa, because France has really, in an effort to be less imperialist, right? To tone down the overt imperialism. They've made a lot of moves, such as demilitarizing these different areas. And history legends had on a French guy that was in an interview, and he was just attacking these defeats, and he was saying, "Look, we're losing Africa because of the France's government, their push to be less imperialist." And so
Less
he was like,
overtly so. Yeah.
he was kind of being France was being criticized, from the right for not being imperialist enough. Kind of. I mean, it's more nuanced, but so Macron, he's very prickly, and they want these feel good optics, and so he's really toned down the overt imperialism, and it hasn't worked well because the vacuum has been filled, according to history legends, by Wagner. And of course, he's non-ideological. He's not pro Wagner or pro Russia. He's not ideological, but he just observes that the vacuum that was left with France's strategy was filled by Wagner and Russia, and it was bad for France. And he was showing clips of a French interview where this guy was making that point. So yeah,
Can I? Yeah,
go ahead.
I mean, without having seen this interview with the French, I guess, sort of right-wing gentleman,
Critic.
Sure. Is it true that imperialism, the international system, there's no such thing as an imperialist nation, but imperialism has gone from, the boots, the kepi, and the bayonet. Basically, either you behave and just send us, the raw silk, the raw uranium, whatever, or we'll kill you and bash your head in. Gone into more subtle ways, as in your local little compradors will do it instead of us. Sure. Was that the reason? I think the reason is poverty has not changed. And when poverty doesn't change, there's resistance. And if it's not channeled in proper channels, what it turns into is fanaticism. So what they had was jihadi terror, basically, in Africa. And the French were ineffective against it. I don't know if it was by decision, by design, or they were just failing. But when people called Wagner in, they just destroyed these fuckers. Get out. And they were successful against them. I think that's a major difference. Not just the toning down of the overt face of the jackboot, the kepi, the guns, but I think it's people,
there's the tri-border area, the area where all three borders meet up, and France used to have a heavy military presence there in the Sahel. It's like Chad and Niger, and I forget, but all three countries border there, and it's a real big crossroads. And Wagner now has a military presence there, a stronghold there where France used to. But I'm definitely no expert on that.
Isn't it curious though that as soon as Burkina Faso and Mali say they support the coup in Niger, that the activity among Boko Haram and the other Islamist groups increases.
Oh,
yeah. Come on, the U.S. is financing them. The U.S. created them. Hillary Clinton made a statement about 8 years ago that says that's what we used them for in Afghanistan, and now they burst into all of these other groups, and she said, well, that's a problem now. But of course, it's a problem that if U.S. intelligence can use these people, they're not adverse to doing it. Now, Niger has asked Wagner to go into
that's official, yes.
Niger, and the people are behind it. The junta, maybe I shouldn't call it a junta, but the generals that have taken over Niger filled a huge soccer stadium with their
30,000 people. It's an amazing video.
Yeah, and so the people are behind them. Even the mainstream media here is showing, well, these people are deluded, but they're behind this coup. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that I went to look up where China was in Africa, and I should have asked where China wasn't, because the only country that does not have a Chinese infrastructure project is Rwanda. Just one.
Rwanda? Is that the one outlying state that's the most
Yeah,
Western?
I
Or
think.
how has it resisted so far?
What
Well,
is Rwanda is the exception of what?
The Belt and Road of Chinese
Rwanda was
infrastructure.
the only country that did not have a contact with Chinese infrastructure
Oh,
projects.
that totally resonates and makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
When we have Chris Black on and we talk about what really happened in Rwanda and how Kagame is just our boy, totally,
Yeah.
and
our total asset.
the brilliant journalism done by Keith Harmon Snow, who now has retired from the job. Uh, Keith Harmon Snow was right on the money all along. That's why Amy Goodman was not didn't never had him on her show.
On the
Jesus.
ground, honest reporting
Democracy.
from Africa.
Yes, yeah, brilliant guy.
I mean,
What?
to sum up, when this was planned, obviously immediately Burkina Faso, Mali said, "No, we're with you." The North African countries either said we're tacitly with you or we're against this ECOWAS intervention, which is basically Algeria, Libya, right? They were these tiny little countries. I think I'm just going to find just a little bit of cheating. Just allow me that. Like the Ivory Coast said, yeah, we'll participate in the ECOWAS invasion. There was a U.S. military transport arrived in Benin, so they are supporting it. But obviously, the main guy who was going to go in was Nigeria, with the president, who was also the leader of ECOWAS, who immediately said, we want a military intervention. And the Senate said, no, fuck no. And now they're looking for some sort of peaceful solution. They met on Sunday to meet again sometime in the future. I think it was supposed to go with these little proxies, as you said, Carlo. They use Boko Haram. They use Al Qaeda. I mean, soon, one fine day soon, it will be the brave Al Qaeda freedom fighters, like the Mujahideen once was, against the Wagner terrorists. It will be the headline. I've already seen it on non-official,
So everybody can go to.
But
I
it
was going
didn't
to say
happen.
Wikipedia, but I meant WikiLeaks, and you can see Clinton's email to Jake Sullivan, reminding him or informing him, "Hey, Al Qaeda is on our side in Syria."
Yes,
So,
you can find that. Like overt.
Al Qaeda always has been on our side. They were on our side in Afghanistan, and they were, working for us when they took the towers. Well, no, let's not even go there.
But what you do?
Go ahead.
No, I didn't let you finish. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, these are proxies. Terrorists are proxies of imperialism, and when the imperialists can't afford to overtly and in the open do these destabilizing things because it would be totally hypocritical and condemnable, they utilize these proxies, and so these proxies are very useful. It's in Central and South America. It's the narco terrorists that we allow to survive and live, and we use them whenever necessary. In the Middle East, it's the intolerant Islamic extremists. Those are our proxies that we call upon to do whatever we need to have done. And then in Eastern Europe, it's the Nazis. We use these neo-Nazi, fascist, ultranationalist terrorists to further our interests of empire there. So, I mean, that's just how the game is played.
I don't want to get distracted and go back to Ukraine. So let's stick with Africa because I have some Sarah Ashton Cirillo nonsense there. But going back to there, at this position when the proxy refuses to fight because of the people, I mean, one of the countries was, let me just find it, which was supposed to be a part of it, was Senegal. The government said, yes, we will support this thing. And immediately there was uprising. You can see them on videos. They were anti-US, big pro-Russia uprising, clashes with the police. They refused. The other was Nigeria, where the Senate said, no, fuck you, to Tinubu, who wanted it. So what happens then? You send Vicky Nuland, who the Russian media, I think the RT headline said, the Maidan midwife, was sent right into Niger, and this is amazing. This is when a little country with poverty-stricken people actually has a fucking backbone. She wasn't allowed to meet with the previous president, the ousted one, Bazoum, who was so, I'm held hostage that he wrote a big Washington Post editorial from hostage and didn't once appeal to his people. He appealed directly to the US, and apparently Blinken promised him he'd be back anyway. He didn't meet with the new leadership. He was just met with some sort of military general. I forget his title, and then she fucked off. Basically, that's it. with nothing. And she was giving warnings that allying with Russia and bringing in Wagner is dangerous. I'm meaning billions of dollars. And immediately as she got home, the aid so-called, to Niger just stopped. And they had this marvelous response. We don't fucking need it. Get it for weight loss programs for Victoria Nuland. Maria Zakharova, the epic foreign ministry spokesperson of Russia, said, oh, she thought she'd put some cookies in a bag and she would find these. Oh, I have to find this because it's so worth it. Victoria Nuland thought it was possible, just like with Ukraine, to put buns in a plastic bag and cheat. Such a banana regime as in Kiev is no longer to be found in Niger. And that's what she found. Even Wagner's Prigozhin responded, it fills my heart with joy that Victoria Nuland went there and cited us, the Wagner group, and is probably contemplating recognizing the new government. It fills my heart with joy. That to me was amazing. A Vicky Nuland trip that fell flat on its face.
Well, you know, the thing to remember about the actions in Senegal and Nigeria is why they were stopped dead in their tracks. What happens is when people are asked to act as proxies, they smell the money. You're talking about people like Tinubu, the president of Nigeria. He smelled the money. Wow. Wow, this is good.
There's going to be something in it for him if he does something for them, and that's what he cares about.
As one of our guests from Nigeria pointed out, Nigeria is a very split and fragmented country, and including in its parliament. And he went into great detail about all this different regions and their different concerns. It was really kind of mind blowing for me. I can't remember 90% of it. It was amazing. That's a complex country, and it came back to bite Tinubu in the ass, and he was stopped dead in his tracks. And that's the way these things work. If you have a few power brokers at the top who can override the general population, they'll do anything. They'll sacrifice their own people.
You know, honestly, I think Hamzat might have some better inside understanding of what happened, but it could be very well likely that Tinubu knew the Senate would block it, and so he saw no political interest in blocking it himself because he gets to maintain good ties, and then he can just blame the Senate for blocking it. And he might have very well known that, and he might, like, if he thought the Senate was going to pass it, he might have done something else. We don't know. I mean, we're 1,000 miles removed from there. But, we don't like the optics of him giving lip service to being for it. But on the other hand, sometimes the lip service is harmless. It can be harmless. Whereas if he would have said no, that can have effects on your country. So he could have just been making a pragmatic political decision. Like, we really don't know. I never say Victoria Nuland without saying her middle name, Victoria fuck the EU Nuland. Just from that phone call.
From the phone call, yes.
Yeah.
And it's Jeffrey Jelly Side Up Pyatt was the other person on that call.
My favorite skit in the world is how Alex Christoforou says she's just a small-time girl with a big dream of destroying Russia, and I really like how that's how she's characterized.
Let's see. So the guy that was leading Niger, he was a big friend in the West, and how it usually happens is, we prop up these compradors that sell out their people, for the benefit of the West, and that's how neo-colonialism, neo-imperialism works. But to give you an understanding, Niger is comprised of two primary families or clans. Each of them about 35% of the population. So together, these two big clans account for like 70% of the population. The leader, what was his name? It starts with a B.
Bazoum.
Bazoum is an Arab. Arabs comprise about 0.2% of the population of Niger. So it's not surprised that he did not have strong public support. So I believe the leader of the current junta, as Carlo called him, and we can call it a junta. I mean,
yes,
whatever. He's from one of the majority families, one of the majority clans. So he definitely at least in that way, is more representative of Niger, in total. Also, I wanted to make a point of, there was an old map of Africa, right? And you had the Gold Coast, you have the Ivory Coast, and then you have the Slave Coast. And this is how the West sees Africa, right? Here's where we can get their gold. Here's where we can get their slaves, and here's where we can get their ivory. I mean, that was literally the name of all of West Africa. It was either the ivory area, the gold area, or the slave area.
If the regions were named today, it would be oil, diamonds, cobalt, and nickel, probably.
Yes.
And gold.
Uranium.
Uranium and gold.
So things haven't changed, right? I mean, they're not so blatant about it. They hide it better. They know the optics are bad, and they've really perfected this propaganda apparatus that they can, do one thing behind the scenes and nobody ever knows about it. And meanwhile, they're just broadcasting a bunch of nonsense.
That's what doesn't change, except what has changed. What has changed is fucking Russia. It really has, because someone put this up, that these are the resources currently needed in the electronics industry, in energy, in everything. If you put a wall around a wall around Africa, then the West pretty much starves all of its industry. It just starves because of the raw resource richness of Africa. And what's changed Russia has discovered its Soviet roots. This amount of goodwill that it created in Africa. The young leader in Burkina Faso, Traore, I think is his name, said, we feel a kinship, a brotherhood with the Russians from historic times. A very, very strong statement. You can watch it in full. But what he means was, they are actually here to help us, unlike the French, which would be a third-rate country without the raw resources they exploit from there, which has already happened, by the way. The fifth largest economy in the world, according to the IMF and the World Bank, is Russia. The largest in Europe, ahead of Germany, ahead of Italy, ahead of France. This is according to World Bank and the IMF. And Russia,
go ahead. I want to focus on that, but go ahead.
After fucking up all NATO's wonder weapons for all to see, burning beautifully on camera, they said, we are renaming, reopening all the embassies in Africa, renaming this university we renamed in the 90s to the, why am I blanking on the name?
Sankara.
Yeah, Thomas Sankara. Maybe, no, it wasn't Sankara, it was the other guy.
The other guy?
The Friendship
Lumumba,
University.
Lumumba.
Patrice Lumumba Friendship University, and we are going to be active in this neighborhood, win-win cooperation, as well as with China and the resources and the development that it does. It's changed forever. People might take a year or two to catch up. But what has been the game in Africa for hundreds of years, really, because it didn't change that much under World War II. I mean, this decolonial struggle under the Soviet Union, it's, I think, apparent right now that it didn't really finish or happen or conclude in any way. Those people aren't freer than they were in 1910, just 100 short years
and they're
later.
not any more prosperous either.
No,
like they haven't been their continent has not developed. So
that's the big change, I think.
And if they tried to develop, they were blocked by
assassinated
in the West. Case in point, Mugabe, and come on. Whatever you want to say about him.
Yeah, I mean, look, Gaddafi, obviously they ran him.
Gaddafi, yeah. Land reform has been a dirty word to the West.
I want to dovetail off your point, Ben, about giving Russia credit for what's going on, because honestly, we can't underestimate the importance of the initiation of the SMO. I mean, it was a military confrontation with the West that Russia decided had to be done. And that has really, lit a spark around the world, and it gives the rest of the world the impetus to stand up and say, you know what, we're done with this rampant exploitation of our resources. And that's why you see these Russian flags flying in these uprisings in these African countries.
Because they see it can be done. They didn't see that for 30 years. They see again that it can be done. It can be successfully resisted.
And they saw, Russia has stuck their neck out. Russia has stepped across that line, and that is encouraging other people to do it.
A further point on that one,
Yeah.
because Russia also suffered the mother of all sanctions, named that way, I think, initially, the mother of all sanctions. Like, there's still tens of thousands of sanctions on Russian entities, businesses, all that. So, other countries, what are you going to do, France? Are you going to sanction Niger? How is that going to look? Are you going to sanction,
Well, they've
Chad
cut
next to
aid,
it?
right? I mean, they
Well,
used to
they've
give
done it.
aid, which was, I'm sure,
Yeah.
useless aid. I mean, their aid still made, resulted in 80%
Aid
of the
is
people
we
not
get
having
we get the
electricity.
grain and the raw resources out, we put it into these packages and added value, and we mark it up as so many million euros and send back cheap little, basically, sustainability kits. That's aid, It's not Thomas Sankara was the one, so not the other guy who said, well, fuck your aid. I want tractors. I want fertilizer. I want us to be. And that's what Putin said at the summit, the Russia-Africa summit, one day after the putsch, the regime change happened in Niger, was Africa can not only feed itself, it can become, I'm not sure if it was a food superpower, definitely a food exporter. And that is reality. We are talking about,
Yeah.
remember South Africa and NAFTA, Mexico for thousands of years produced its own food, different varieties of maize and corn and everything. And all of that was destroyed,
Yeah, with the
And
GMO.
same
Yeah.
thing happened with Africa.
We should get them. We should terrorize the young man in Burkina
Theorize.
Faso. Well, he's just, he gives warms my heart.
Same here, but theorize is a new word. I give you full credit. I like it.
So Russia didn't just stick their neck out, right? They stuck their neck out, and they're winning on both fronts. They're winning on the economic front, and they're winning on the military front. So the economics,
And
it's just
the
astonishing.
political, there's three fronts.
Sure, agreed. Economically, you mentioned it earlier, fifth largest economy on the planet, and they're almost fourth because I think somebody's like tiny bit ahead. And while Russia is growing exponentially, the country that's a tiny bit ahead of them in fourth place isn't doing so well. So it's just a matter of a few months, maybe a year or so, before the official statistics will list Russia as the fourth wealthiest country.
Japan,
fourth largest. Yeah, Japan is not their future is not bright.
China just outperformed Japan in the last couple of years. It outperformed Germany, the US, everybody in car exports for the first time in 2023. A new report just came in, so that's Betty buys for the car superpower now.
Yeah, Japan is in decline, so it's just a matter of time, very short time, before Russia's the fourth largest economy in the world. And I thought, we were told by our media that they're just a gas station with nukes or something like that.
Yes.
So and especially after the mother of all sanctions hits them, for them to be growing so quickly and to just reach the fifth largest economy and then the fourth. I mean, again, all of that is liberating the people of Africa and giving them reason to to not put up with the rank exploitation that they've been enduring for the past several generations, really, centuries, you could say.
There's no coincidences there. China is growing rich and strong. On that point, I'm composing a letter to my dad. I might have mentioned this. I'm just going to list the last 3 years of China car export, right? 2020, 1 million cars. That's surpassing the USA. 2021, there's 2 million cars exported, surpassing South Korea, right? 2022 was 3 million cars, surpassing Germany forever. And 2023, this year, was the latest one, 4 million cars. That's how China goes. It doesn't go in a little flat line or something like that. It goes fucking exponentially.
Well, I learned
Japan. So they are growing rich and just creating shit in like faster than anybody else, including 5G towers, cars, whatever you want in Africa infrastructure. While Russia has proven that it's in the military industry is no fucking joke. It can blind the Western gear that costs, 10 times more. And these are big changes that most of the world is paying huge attention.
We know, Ben, that Chinese people are sneaky. And we know that these car exports are nothing more than a ploy to spy on drivers in the UK.
Yes, exactly. That's what the UK's latest scare threat is. By the way, the biggest enemy of the UK now is the Islamic Iran, apparently, which came out in the Express or somewhere.
One British official declared Iran as the biggest threat to the UK's national security. And it was very surprising to China and Russia to see that happening. But
It was the cover of it's the Sunday Times. It's kind of a tabloid, but it's one of those printed things, and it was the biggest national security threat. And then the sneaky Chinese cars.
Yeah, they're slipping. I got a question for you guys.
Yeah.
Okay, Russia's making itself felt economically to a certain extent, but primarily as through Wagner as a security security, providing security to certain, to Burkina Faso and Mali and hopefully Niger. But China is everywhere there. Do you think China should play a more robust role than it is playing, or do you think that the economic side is enough because it's it's kind of quietly undercutting all of these things? I mean, one of the if you were living in Niger and in abject poverty, and you could see somehow how China was improving the condition across the Sahel, say over in over in Sudan, where where they've just built this enormous dam, uh, providing electricity to the whole country. Um, wouldn't you kind of go, hey, I would like some of that now? Do you think China's role should be more over more? I mean, I know it's
What do you think, Ben?
Match made in heaven is something I said before, and that's how I imagine it. China should build because that's what China's good at, build the infrastructure, build the energy hubs, and obviously it should be defended properly. This is nationally critical infrastructure. So in my perfect scenario, Wagner should be defending those, not really China. China doesn't, I think it shouldn't. It made a wise decision not to interfere in local, what it calls local issues. So what it does was whatever your form of government, whatever your internal contradictions, we do win-win cooperation, nothing else. Russia is doing something that it historically always did. We're here to help with the stuff that we can help with. They obviously do joint ventures with Rostec, Rosatom, so they do that as well. But they are not afraid of, actual military confrontation with the West. Whereas China, I think it suits them better. There might be a clash coming, and nobody knows if it is over Taiwan. Then we'll see what the PLA is made of, and I think they're even more underestimated than Russia was in 2022. But I'm not sure that I change anything in the behavior of the two. Billy Bob?
Yeah, I don't think I would want China to change their approach. I think they would have to develop their own system. And Russia has a system in place. Wagner, they've already got something going that can do those kinds of defensive protection kind of things, whereas China would have to build it from the ground up. And China could do that. China would have to change their policies. China would have to change its policy of strict non-interventionism, and but since Wagner is already there, Wagner already has the system set up. It is a match made in heaven, and definitely these projects, all these billions and trillions of investment, they do need to be protected because the West is going to attempt to, at a very low budget, just destroy whatever they can. They're going to, they're going to assassinate the engineers. They're going to blow up the dams.
There's definitely issues there. Yeah.
So
terrorist attacks.
Those things need to be protected. I think China is wide-eyed. I think they understand the problem better than we do. And yeah.
Also, China is not under a million sanctions. So you remember Wagner was sort of secretive. We didn't really hear about it before 2022. It was this secret thing that appeared here and there like ghosts. They got out. Then it became public face of Bakhmut, now Artyomovsk, and now they're part of the Russian military. Prigozhin, the traitor, is now just all over the place, popping up on TV shows, popping up at the Russia-Africa summit. So it's now an arm of the Russian military, and they can do it because they've suffered all the sanctions. What the fuck is there? What are they going to do with them yet? China, obviously, it will destroy the Western economy, is not under a million sanctions yet. So it can't just create give me something. It's a Korean phrase, but anyway, the song, the military PMCs and send it everywhere.
It's a problem for the planet if they get too confrontational with the West. because then the West would respond, and then we'd start to have a ramping up of the economic war, which is going to have fallout first in Africa. Like that's where it's all, any kind of global economic collapse is going to hit the most vulnerable, poorest countries the hardest and the quickest.
Yeah.
And so to avoid all that, China wants to be as non-confrontational as is possible. So that's the approach they're taking. I think it's the correct approach. Inevitably, the West is going to be pushing things too far, I presume.
Yeah, just wait and see. I mean, they sent 3,000 troops to Iran now. I'm guessing they want tensions with Tehran. And this is the US, by the way. So who knows? I mean, the Ukrainians are upset that some weapons have been that were meant for Ukraine have been sent to Taiwan. Now, other weapons are being sent to the Persian Gulf instead of them. So, if I were Zelensky or Podolyak or these people, I'd be seeing, fuck, we're getting out of the spotlight here, man. This doesn't look good because of all these tensions flaring up. I'm sorry, I didn't know where exactly I was going with that.
Well, no, you brought up a few interesting things. So the U.S. is contemplating putting troops on private tankers going through the Persian Gulf, or the Straits of Hormuz, at least. And I'm not sure if that's what you were referencing with the 3,000 troops to Iran, or is that different?
It was a military headline. I don't know if they're stationed there or anything because I didn't read deep into that article. I was focused on.
So there's been a tit for tat attack on different tankers going through. So the West has seized Iranian flagged tankers, and in response, Iran has seized tankers that are Western aligned. And so the latest was the U.S. is going to put a stop to Iran's response by putting Marines or whatever on certain tankers that are going to be vulnerable to being snatched by the Iranians that travels down their coast.
I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know how many years has Iran been under sanctions, but it's probably quite a few decades preparing for exactly this kind of confrontation. And then you look at China, who for, I don't know, the last 70 years has been preparing for exactly the kind of confrontation that awaits them over Taiwan. So, interesting thoughts. It was going to be the same that Zelensky said this in one of his daily addresses, that Russia may be left without its Black Sea fleet if it continues to attack our ports on the Black Sea, which I don't know you're threatening the Russian fleet with, but good luck with you. It sounds the same to me.
That was a bold prediction, and I mean, what's happening is Ukraine is being given all these technologically advanced standoff weapons. So these standoff drones, underwater drones, these even like the Storm Shadow missile, the French version of the Storm Shadow. So they're using these just to terrorize. So I'm not sure what happened with Carlo. I thought Carlo was reading. Hopefully he's okay.
I hope
it looked like he was reading something, and then he cut out. But if he pops back up, I'll put it back in. Hopefully everything's going okay with him.
Yeah.
So, it seems like Ukraine has kind of given up liberating any territory, and they've resigned themselves to just terrorizing Russia and Crimea, and making them pay a price for the SMO. But also,
by the way, other than the French and the British, which is the Storm Shadow and the Scalp missiles, the German not the Bundeswehr, but the actual ministers have come to a consensus that they're going to send not Scalp. They have Taurus missiles, exactly the same, around 500 kilometers. Like the Germans, they always set on, no, we're not going to send tanks, we're going to send helmets. Well, we'll send a few tanks, but we're not going to send anything bigger. And then they just do this crap at the very end when it's obvious that it's gone. But there was another headline, it was Bild or Zeitung, that the deliveries have slowed down considerably. They promised 110 tanks and maybe delivered 10. They promised Marders, other stuff, and haven't delivered anything. So there are some pragmatic people somewhere in Germany. I don't know where they've been sitting, but it's not that good. And Germany is not looking well since the news came out that for European corporations as a whole, the last, what was it, like 400 days? No, however many days of the SMO cost them 500 billion. That's not a very good look. And the weird thing is that they seem to be having issues with Poland, while Poland is also having issues with Ukraine. They're having like high level uh, just diplomatic rows with each other, which is very interesting.
Well, failure leads to finger pointing, and finger pointing leads
Cracks
to
and finger point.
infighting.
We're at that point. Yeah, we're
So,
definitely.
so those are all good, great things to see. I saw a video, a pro-Ukrainian video, on why all the leopards were taken off the front line, and they referred to Russia's evil and diabolical policy of giving bonuses to Russian troops that took them out, and so they've moved
They're
them
trophies.
off the front line and put them ostensibly in defensive fighting positions where they can be used, in defense of,
I don't know
in the
what.
event of a Russian counteroffensive. But yeah, I mean, it's just amazing that these wonder weapons. I mean,
And then there's the
because of the bounties they get pulled. But yeah,
then there's the British Challenger, which is yet to challenge anybody. It's yet to be seen on the front lines because they really
and the
don't
Abrams
want.
too is
Yeah.
allegedly on its way. Right, some Abrams are allegedly on the way.
Yeah, I mean they greenlit for delivery. I fixed up some old Abramses, and they say late autumn. I think that was the official. Sorry.
Yeah, autumn. Well, that's what. Yeah,
Autumn. Yeah. I mean, right now Ukraine has received more aid from the US than any country in history. The original headline was since 1945. That includes the Marshall Plan for rebuilding Europe. That includes the Lend-Lease with Soviet Union. It includes everything. But if you add up the numbers, more country than anybody in the history of the United States, and that's what they have to show for it. I mean, yeah, it's falling apart. As you said, the finger pointing is starting. All of the Western headlines about this counteroffensive say, this NATO strategy didn't really work because it was never tried against a real enemy. There's headlines about the Bakhmut counteroffensive has faltered. The difficulties with, as you know, the Russians have made many memes about this. The British readout of intelligence said it was shrubs and what do you call it? Like bushes, shrubs and bushes. That's what slowed it down. So the Russians are making memes about weed whackers and lawnmowers and all that stuff.
I didn't know that. I haven't seen those memes, but there's been 2 phases so far of the months-long counteroffensive, and phase 3 is about to start. Also, allegedly, according to a headline, we're about to start phase 3 of this big counteroffensive. I hope they go as well as phase 1 and 2. I expect they will. I'm looking forward to see how that goes. So let's see.
If we want to sort of lock it up somehow, we do have to end, I think, with Hiroshima, which to me was as amazing as Borrell's statement on the grain. But I want to add that Sarah Ashton Cirillo, the woman, transgender woman who became the speaking head of the Ukrainian armed forces for Western, Western audiences, had her social media announcement. I don't know if you had the misfortune to see it, but she had this cardboard cutout of a Russian soldier behind her, and she said, paraphrasing, but the end will be literal quoting. You know the difference, because we are human and they are not. Slava Ukraini. That's how she ended that, and I know I've seen that before in history when someone becomes the non-fucking human. Was that
this week or was that a little bit older?
No, that's fresh. That was actually.
Oh my god!
I think
so.
Monday.
Again, with the "they're not human" Nazi talk, just right out in the open. But it's okay, right? Because she's transgendered, and transgendered people maybe get a pass for being not. I hope not. I hope that's not the liberals are trying to shove down everybody's throat. But no, that's
a discussion for another time. As you mentioned, with history legends, you don't partake in the whole LGBTQ issue, but we really have to hash that out at some point in the future. But for another time.
Yeah, it's the weaponization of these issues and their issues. Like it's societal issues. It causes issues within society that need to be dealt with and addressed in a humane, loving way that accepts people's humanity and how they want to live their lives. Like there's no problem with that. But weaponizing it in the interest of imperialism, not kind of in the same way that Israeli ultranationalism and Zionism weaponized the persecution of Jewish people, right? For
Yes.
for really unjust and evil ends, in the creation of the state of Israel, which again, is just something that's was never only possible because of terrorism, ethnic cleansing, and land theft, right? That's the only way you can create a country of people for people of a particular religion is through the terrorism, ethnic cleansing, and land theft. So they weaponized Jewish persecution to make that imperialist project possible. And we see similar things going on where they're weaponizing persecution of a minority that is persecuted and is mistreated, and they're weaponizing that for ends that are totally despicable.
Absolutely.
But,
do you know what the analogy is closer to me for me is closer to is how basically this neocon warlike cabal loves to use the anti-colonial struggle, in their phrases today. We have to decolonize Russia. We have to decolonize China, meaning we want to chop it up into little helpless territories. And they use the old language of us, the communists, the old communists who were within the decolonial struggle.
I can't imagine the mindset
the 180
of liberal people that fall for that and that buy into that. Like how is that persuasive to you? To think that
there are people,
Russia needs to be decolonized because they're an imperialist power. I don't know.
Imperialist and they're colonialist somehow.
Obviously, there is a mindset out there that is susceptible to that kind of a pitch, and that's why that kind of a pitch is being made by the think tanks that are, but it's the same think tanks that are largely responsible for forming those minds in the first place. So they form the minds, they fill it with all these thoughts, for lack of a better term, and then they know how to manipulate those perspectives in a way that benefits their interests. But that's propaganda. They're very good at it.
They are. When it comes to propaganda, and this, I guess we can end with Hiroshima. By the way, today is Nagasaki Day. So a few days ago, was Hiroshima Day, the 78th anniversary of the dropping of the bomb in 1945, which all historical documents, including from the presidents, from the generals, the leadership, said it was unnecessary. It has no particular meaning in the war or military achievement at all. It was a signal to Stalin. And they did this talk. They did a series of talks, including Fumio Kishida, the Japanese prime minister, and this time not Borrell, but Guterres, the UN head of the UN. I don't want to learn his fucking title. And they mentioned the US 0 times in both their speeches, but they both mentioned Russia. So that to me was insane. 100,000 people basically perished in flame instantly. About 200,000 died if you count. I almost said comorbidities, fucking pandemic anyway, from later injuries and radioactive poisoning. And we just don't know where the bombs came from. They just fell from the skies. To this day, I guess we don't know who dropped them. That is the lesson that came home from Hiroshima, which was insane. Luckily, there was massive protests among the local Japanese people who said no to. Hey, he didn't die. He just went to sleep. Weekend at Carlos.
That's the good news, or that's the bad news, depending on who you are.
There were protests against a renewed war along with the US against China, alongside this Hiroshima summit. So that was the good news for me. But there were other people interviewed on the streets. It's going viral, who said, yeah, it was the right thing to do. It was the quick way to end the war, basically saying thank you for the bomb.
So that sent me to another dimension. It's like the 78th anniversary of the dropping of the bomb. So there's a commemoration. I mean, you can't call it a celebration. It's a commemoration. No. And there's a lot of people saying, hey, we're not going to, join the West in their crusade against China. But like you said, they had other people that are indoctrinated with their pro-West indoctrination saying, oh, you know what? The bombs were necessary. We needed to be bombed.
Those videos.
That's not true. That's not true, my Japanese friends. They were totally unnecessary. They didn't win the war. There was never going to be a land invasion of Japan. by the United States. It was ultimately the Soviet Union declaring war on Japan that got Japan to surrender to the West. And Oliver Stone, of course, his documentary, The Untold History of the U.S. or something like that. I mean, it's a great resource if anybody wants to learn more about that. I've neglected our viewers. Viewers, I'm so sorry. You have said so many great comments, so I'm going to go through them.
Hi, Paulie.
We've got Ursula. Burrell is a meme nowadays. Yes, that
The
guy.
gardener. He is.
The gardener from hell. Jeremy. Yes, Burrell and his sadism. Yeah. Let's see. And then Paulie Gonzalo did a video about Newland's background. No, that's true.
Oh yes, Granddaddy was very much a Banderite.
And also the second in command in Canada,
Chrystia Freeland.
Freeland. She used to be a CNN commentator, opinioner on CNN before she became VP or whatever she is in Canada. But yeah, her dad ran a full-on Nazi newspaper. He was a Nazi propagandist, and she's following right in his footsteps. So yep. God bless him.
There's continuity, isn't there?
But it's tough being a host here. A lot going on. Carlo, I thought was just reading. Apparently, he might have died. I see that you're back
and resurrected.
We are just joking.
I had to wait 3 days. I don't have the time.
You are no longer gray Carlo. You are white Carlo. Well, sorry, that's a Lord of the Rings thing.
You guys were talking about. You were talking about the Hiroshima, Nagasaki. World. I have an anecdote about that.
Yeah.
Paul Fussell wrote a book called "Thank God for the War," because he was one of the American servicemen who was going to be shipped out to mainland Japan in the event that there was no agreement. Now, the thing, and so we had this reviewer for the Washington Post here in Washington, and he was lauding that book, Paul Fussell's book, and Jonathan Yardley, that was his name. And so I wrote him a critical letter because I had actually been studying the atomic bomb, the atomic age, all of that for a number of years. And I wrote him a very detailed letter talking about the latest documentation that had come out, how the Japanese were suing for peace. Their only major concern was to allowing the emperor to maintain his position as essentially a god within the country, the supreme authority. There were no other elements blocking the treaty. So Yardley wrote me back this really kind of a snotty little remark about we can all have our differences. But then when the further information came out, apparently he got a hold of some of it, and he didn't publish a direct apology to me. I was nothing to him, but he did publish a kind of apologia about the fact that he had been wrong and maybe had spoken too hastily. That's how damaging, or that's how imperative, whatever word I'm losing here, that information that came out from U.S. archives and
damning is the word.
Yes, damning, and Soviet archives. That's how it even convinced this schmuck, this T. and Doyle kind of literary critic that the Washington Post had for years. But no, the Japanese people applauding the bomb. You're an idiot for applauding the bomb. There are the reasons they did it had nothing. The major reason they did it was to deter the Soviet Union.
Yeah, it's outstated, perfectly opaque that's why they did it. By the way, this is by no means all the Japanese people. There was a big gathering saying "fuck off, get out of our land." There's every year in Okinawa, so there are upstanding Japanese citizens. There are just a few wearing, Disney, Marvel t-shirts and just completely in another world. But on topic, has anybody? I haven't watched the new Oppenheimer flick yet. I'm
No.
expecting some revisionism, but I haven't watched it yet. I'm just interested. If
I've heard a lot of good reviews from smart people. So people who I expected to deconstruct it. I think. Oh, you know what? I saw an Oliver Stone review. So Oliver Stone, of course, knows a lot about the history because he did his documentary series and he's focused specifically on the bomb. And he said it was a great movie. He took exception with like two things, and one of them was a real big thing. And I think it had to do with why the bomb was used. I think because I don't think
that's what I'm expecting. They're going to create a narrative for that, aren't they?
Yet he found it great. He said it was tremendous. Everybody's reviewed it well. I have a hard time liking movies that are supposed to be based on history just because I can't deal with lies, historical lies.
Yeah.
But
I'm expecting disappointment, but I am going to watch it because 2/3 of the dream team, the nuke dream team, were Hungarian, Stella Reda and Szilárd Leó. So that's a little local pride in me. But also the timing. This came out just now. And what is in the works coming out in, I think, November is a Napoleon movie, a guy who got smacked in Russia. I'm just thinking about if I'm a Hollywood producer, what's with this timing? What's going on here? But just my private thoughts, nothing to do with...
Was it November that the winter kind of ended Napoleon's...
I don't know, but they had to make a decision at some point that they're going to make a movie that comes out this November. And I'm just wondering... why now show the French being fucked up by Russia? Just the thought.
I really don't know what more could be said about Oppenheimer and his situation. I mean,
I have to watch the movie. I'm not going to pay a bloody ticket for it. Sorry, YouTube, but I'm going to watch it.
Yeah, we'll get it on Netflix or something.
I don't know. He wasn't. He didn't show much courage in the face of, I think, his beliefs. He was no Leo Szilard, that's for damn sure. And then he stripped him of his top secret security clearance anyway, and he ended up being Harry S. Truman's tutor, where he had to go once a year and explain the new advances in nuclear technology to a man who couldn't understand how to put his shoes on, and without Jimmy Burns doing it for him. And
it was only years or decades later when he did this sort of I'm so sorry, the destroyer of worlds, the famous.
No, he made that statement, I think, before the bomb was dropped.
Oh, he did.
I think that was after the testing.
Yeah, I think after the testing. So that's when he was.
I think it was Trinity. I think after Trinity, he said he made that statement from the Bhagavad Gita.
That's when he was remorseful. But Szilárd Leó, the Hungarian who you mentioned, he wanted no nuclear first use policy, and he was against him, got him fucked out of there because he was the stand-up guy.
Leo Szilard, the FBI tailed him and followed him, ruined his life basically. Yeah. As they are wont. So I don't know, and there's a name that's not mentioned about the end of the war, and that's Curtis LeMay and the firebombing of Tokyo, a good part of the rest of Japan. I mean, there was nothing standing in Tokyo. That city was made out of wood, and it was crushed by Curtis LeMay.
Yeah, the U.S. officially referred to it as a terror bombing. They terror bombed Japan.
Dresden, and just 10 times worse. Yeah.
Yeah, and Curtis LeMay's famous statement is, when about Vietnam was, we should just bomb them back to the Stone Age, and an aide replied, "Well, perhaps they're already there." It's like, so
and yet they won.
Yeah, and yet they won. Yes. Yeah. So
they also the double tap. So they'll bomb the city and they'll wait for the aid workers and then they'll bomb them.
That was born in Vietnam?
No, that was World War II. That was the terror bombing. So they blamed they said the Islamic terrorists would do that. They were always condemned by the West for doing that. During the war on terror, that was the big. They're just without morals, these Islamic people. But guess who they learned it from? So yeah, I mean,
good old US of A, freedom and democracy, human rights, LGBTQIA.
If you're gonna make a movie about a great administrator, somebody that could,
Drop a name. Drop a name.
Yeah, that would be Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer was a great administrator. He could see. Mostly, he could see gifted approaches. He could see, you know, that Edward Teller and Stan Ulam were providing valuable information about not only an atomic weapon but a nuclear weapon, and he had his reservations about that. The more powerful bomb. He could delegate authority. He could, if one group came to him with some insight, uh, like the implosion, for example, the way you create the explosion is you put you put the explosive devices at very specified spaces around
The
the
core.
bomb itself that are the core that's going to explode in and set off the fission. Uh, he was very good at that, but I don't think ultimately he provided. He was not a
Yeah.
physics genius. He was, bright,
But great.
And
obviously.
why would
Great
they need a
manager.
card chase? I don't know how
Great
a card
manager.
chase is going to fit in. But maybe that's the first movie without a car chase. I don't know. I haven't seen it.
It's
But,
not another
uh,
Furious movie. Yeah.
A car chase.
Anyway, I think we've
You
sort
always
of
gotta have a car chase, Carlo.
weaned
Maybe
off the
the bomb
news.
was in the trunk and they were trying. I don't know. Go ahead, Ben.
We've weaned off the
Yeah.
news into popular culture. So all of you here for the latest in foreign policy, glad to have you. Thanks for being with us. But yeah, we're just basically back to just chatting about everyday stuff. I'm wondering if we should get towards wrapping it up at some point.
Yeah. Carlo, so everything's all right. You had a technical issue.
He's alive.
You don't have to worry. Viewers don't have to worry that you died, went to hell. Satan said, "I don't want you."
No, I fired my technician. Well,
Okay.
it
Oh,
was their
poor
fault.
Rosalie.
I canceled a
You're
contract.
done with Rosalie.
Yeah.
You couldn't survive a day without her, sir. But okay, so everybody, yeah, we appreciate the viewership. This is our 8th episode of our roundtable. We will be back on Thursday with a foreign policy review, and next week Tuesday with the Blowback roundtable.
Please
I'm
like and
sure-
share if you can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, please like and share if you can. And if you're here with us, thank you for watching.
Yes. Goodbye.
Okay, I'm gonna hit end broadcast. Thank you, everybody.